Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, What You Need to Know, Updates to ISO 9001 and AS9100. Today's program is brought to you by the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition. The Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition is an association of Northwest defense and security industry businesses. PNDC focuses on strengthening our members' businesses through growth and training, one-on-one counseling, and business-to-business networking. The purpose of today's presentation is to introduce us to the upcoming revisions to ISO 9001 and AS9100. Explore potential impacts to our member companies and look at resources and tools to plan for the transition to this new revision. We welcome your questions during today's webinar. Please type your question in the webinar dashboard to the right of your screen under the Questions tab. You may ask a question anytime during the presentation. Most questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. You will be sent a copy of the slide deck for today's program at the conclusion of the event. We have an hour reserved for the presentation, but can go longer if you have additional questions. I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Marcia Buser and Tristan Buser-Molter. Marcia is the quality manager for Zephyr Inc. in Bingen, Washington. She has over 30 years experience in implementing and managing quality systems, and in the course of her career has held quality management positions at In Situ, Altman, Browning & Company, Techform Advanced Casting, Control Tech, R.R. Donnelley Northwest, and Precision Cast Parts. Marcia is an exemplar Global Quality Management System Lead Auditor, ASQ Certified Manager of Quality Organizational Excellence, Certified Quality Auditor, Certified Biomedical Auditor, and a Plex EPIC ISO 9000 Training System Certified Trainer. Tristan has been a Quality Management System Auditor and Counselor since 2012. He's an exemplar Global Quality Management System Principal Auditor and has passed the exam to become qualified to be an aerospace auditor for AS9100 registration. He is also experienced in implementing and auditing ISO 13485 and ISO 14000. Tristan is based in Portland, Oregon, and serves clients in Oregon and Washington. He has also worked as a third-party contractor for OMAC and Impact Washington. Thank you for joining us today. Marcia and Tristan, please begin the presentation.
All right, well, thank you so much for the introduction, Kate, and thank you to PNDC for having us here today. I want to start with a little personal note. I got my start in quality and in aerospace over 30 years ago in the late 1970s when I started a new job at Precision Cast Parts Corporation. And Tristan was 8 weeks old when I started there. And it's really a thrill to be presenting with him today. Little did I imagine that he would follow me into the quality profession. So on that note, let's clarify what we're talking about today. We're focused primarily on two standards that are undergoing substantial revision, ISO 9001 and AS9100. We're making an assumption that the audience of this webinar is familiar with the standards. So this is not meant to be an introduction to those standards. However, it will be helpful to sort out some of the terminology and acronyms, which can be dizzying, especially when you're not living and breathing this every day. So we often hear people say, oh, we're ISO registered or we're 9000 registered. So just to clarify, a company is registered or certified to ISO 9001 or AS9100. The ISO organization does not register organizations. That's done by a third-party certification body or a registrar. ISO only publishes the standard, and in the US it does that through ANSI, the American National Standards Institute. The International Aerospace Quality Group publishes AS9100 and the other AS standards, and they do that through SAE or the Society of Automotive Engineers in the US. So to go back a bit, after its introduction in 1987, the ISO 9001 standard became globally accepted and evolved significantly through several revisions since 1987. And there's now approximately 1.2 million organizations that are certified to that standard. And since 1987, there's been industry sectors that have chosen to develop more industry-specific standards based on 9001. For example, the automotive industry has QS 9000, which is now TS 16949, medical devices with ISO 13483, and telecommunications with TL 9000. This was also the case in aerospace. Many of the prime aerospace companies in the beginning found that ISO 9001 did not address their specific requirements, so they developed their own standards. And there may be people listening to this that have had experience working to Boeing's D1-9000. So the first ISO 9001-based aerospace standard was issued in 1999. And as ISO 9001 standards were revised, the aerospace standard followed suit. Most significantly to PNDC's constituents, the last revision of AS9100 in 2009 expanded the standard beyond aerospace to include aviation, space, and defense organizations. So AS9100 has all of the requirements of 9001, and there's approximately 105 additional requirements or amplifications. For example, configuration management, risk management, on-time delivery, project management, and supplier scope of approval. So I do want to make a comment on the way the standards are written. ISO 9001 has a space between it, and the revision is denoted by the year. Go back to slide 3. The first, before that one. Thank you. Okay. So ISO 9001 has a space with a colon and the revision year. AS9100 is written without a space, and the revision is denoted by an alpha character. I can't explain why that's different, but that is the convention that you see on the standard. You will see them referred to all kinds of different ways. But if you're writing it in, for instance, in your quality manual on your website, you should probably use the correct convention. Okay, next slide. So just to add to the confusion, there are a couple related standards that are similar in numbering. One is ISO 9000, which is going to be revised and issued along with ISO 9001. ISO 9000 describes the fundamentals of a quality management system, and it defines related terms. And this standard is going to be particularly important with the issue of 9001 because all of the definitions are now going to be contained in ISO 9000. AS9101E is the standard that the certification bodies must follow when they audit. And as an organization, you don't need the standard. However, if you're going to be going through an AS9100 audit, it's extremely helpful to know what tools and approach your auditor must use. And it's a little bit confusing because AS9101 revved from D to E in the past year, and AS9100 is going to be revving from C to D. So it's a little difficult to keep straight, but that might be helpful. All right, so why are the standards getting revised? Well, first of all, it's a requirement that all ISO standards are reviewed every 5 years. by their technical committees. And it's intended that by reviewing them on a regular basis, they will maintain their relevancy, even though the review committee may opt not to revise the standard at that time. And it's important to keep the standards relevant in the international trade and modern business environment, and much has changed since 1987. The most visible change to the standard is the restructuring to what is referred to as Annex XL. This is the document that ISO has put together that defines the framework for a generic management system. The organization started getting feedback around 2003 that all of these different management standards had different formats and content. So they developed a standard to standardize the standards. All new ISO management system standards must adhere to this framework, and all the current ones must migrate at the next revision, which is what's happening with ISO 9001. So Annex XL provides common text and numbering schemes, and it's being changed to reflect the need to make standards more flexible to any kind of operation. And Tristan will be going into some of those changes. But here's the high-level structure that all ISO management system standards must follow. So it goes from the current 8 broad clauses to 10 clauses. The first 3 clauses are the same as we have today. And when the new ISO 9001 comes out, sections 2 and 3 will reference ISO 9000. They will basically have no content other than to refer you to ISO 9000. The other clauses, starting with section 4, just like now, that's the auditable portion of the standard, starts with clause 4, follows the Plan, Do, Check, Act model, which most of you are probably familiar with. This is the problem-solving and continual improvement model made famous by Dr. Deming. So this high-level structure includes standardizing numbering. It standardizes definitions and text. And some examples of identical definitions include organization, interested party, policy, objective, competence, and conformity. An example of identical text is all of the management system standards have to state top management shall ensure that responsibilities and authorities for relevant roles are assigned and communicated within the organization. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tristan to see how these changes are impacting ISO 9001 and AS9100 as we know them today.
So most of what's in the standard now is still there in some form. The clauses and numbering are rearranged and some of the terminology is different, but most of it's pretty similar to what's already there. But we're going to focus on what's actually different in the new revision. So first, there's a greater emphasis on process. This has been a trend for some decades now, going to organizing by process, but it's even more focused on. There's this alignment with strategic direction. So in the past, the standards were focused more on conforming to the standard, and now there's a push to also be effective in your process. It's not just conform to them. There's also integration of the QMS into the organization's business processes, determining risks and opportunities, emphasis on change management, introduction of knowledge management, increased performance evaluation, and improvement is expanded. So the new alignment, as you just saw, aligns better with the Plan, Do, Check, Act model. And like the current standard, the clauses 4 through 10 are the significant requirements. Section 1, Scope, and Clause 2 is called Normative References, and as we mentioned, it only references the ISO 9000. And Clause 3 is the definitions, which is, again, just a reference. So 4 through 10 are the ones that you're going to want to pay attention to that will have the greatest effect on your organization. So a little bit about context of the organization. It's defined that the business the business environment, the combination of internal and external factors and conditions that can have an effect on the organization's products and services, and investments and interested parties. So ISO 9000 notes that this concept is often referred to as business environment. 9001 notes that the external context can be facilitated by factors arising from legal, technological, competitive market, cultural, social, and economic environments. And the internal context is influenced by issues relating to values, culture, knowledge, and performance of the organization. So who are the interested parties? The standards now states that there need to be, their needs and expectations need to be understood. So ISO 9000 provides the definition. Interested parties can be a person or organization that can affect or be affected or perceive themselves to be affected by decision or activity. So examples of these would, of course, be customers, owners, people in the organization, but could also be suppliers, unions, bankers, competitors, pressure groups. Now, interested parties in your organization could be your material supplier. Maybe you have a separate site that supplies to your location, but it's in your company. Could be internal or external IT services. So this requirement's generated a lot of discussion on LinkedIn discussion groups and is sure to provoke some lively discussions among the company's leadership team. Companies that have already implemented ISO 14001 should be familiar with this concept, but it may require other management teams to look beyond just what their customer and supplier relationships. So some tools that can help include a SWOT, or strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, and a balanced scorecard. So I'll talk more about that in a minute. But interestingly enough, both of these tools have long been in use as business management tools and not so much in quality management. So it's clear that this revision aims to align the quality management system with the organization's business strategy. This business thinking addresses a long-standing criticism that the ISO 9001 family of standards are not part of the business systems with an output of quality. So looking at clause 5, leadership, this management responsibility has been changed to leadership, but it still refers to top management. So there's an increased emphasis on top management's role and linking it to the organization's improvement, risks, opportunities, and ensuring these processes are meeting their intended outputs, again, this effectiveness. So there's also a need to integrate the quality management system with the strategic direction of the company. One big change is there's no longer a requirement for a management representative for the quality system. However, this requirement is said to be retained or put back in the new AS9100 revision. So if you're AS registered, you won't be getting rid of that. And this is because there are many regulatory agencies require a designated point of contact. So you won't have to change that if you're AS registered. But whether there's a management representative or not, most of the requirements that are in the old or the current revision are there. It just doesn't have to be one person, and you don't have to call them the management representative. Most of the responsibilities are the same or even expanded. So clause 6, this one has probably gotten the most talk with the new revision. So it's about risk-based thinking, and it's called planning under this clause. So the current standard mentions risk 2 times, and the 2015 revision mentions risk and risk-based thinking 49 times. So it's not such a big difference or leap for AS9100 registered companies, as risk management is already a requirement. So while risk has always been implied or inherent in many of the clauses of the current standard, particularly preventive action, it's now much more explicit and addressed throughout the standard. So what is definitely new is the term risk-based thinking. As many of us, including certification auditors, are rejoicing that preventive action is no longer an explicit requirement. It was always a challenging one to conform to and tended to be very confusing and confused with corrective action. So this clause not only requires that organizations prevent and reduce undesired effects, but also enhance desirable effects. So we think that this time-honored SWOT analysis tool will see a resurgence thanks to this clause. Here's an example of a SWOT using a real-life situation. This is a very short example, but let's say a company has a potential new contract starting with a prototype run of a large number of machine parts. Some are simple, some are complex, and they want to outsource the simple ones or less complex ones. So strengths could be that it frees up capacity to make the higher value added parts. Weaknesses, there's less control over the process and our company's inspectors and engineers are not on site. Opportunities, there's an existing relationship and good track record with this supplier. And threats, company has to purchase tooling for the supplier, do certain operations, and adds cost and risks. So ISO 31000 is a standard that provides guidelines on formal risk management, and that may be useful and it's likely to become more used once this new revision is issued. So the 2015 revision states not all the processes of the quality management system represent the same level of risk to the organization's ability to meet its objectives. And the consequences of processes, products, service, or system nonconformities are not the same for all organizations. So for some organizations, the consequences of delivering nonconforming products can result in a minor inconvenience for the customer, whereas for others, the consequences can be far-reaching or fatal. So risk-based thinking means considering risk qualitatively and perhaps quantitatively. So when defining the rigor and degree of formality needed to plan and control the quality management system, and this should be considered. So Clause 6 also includes the familiar requirement, quality objectives. This requirement is now made more explicit in the need for the organization to determine the resources for achieving them and how they will be evaluated. So linking these objectives to what you're trying to do and can you really measure them, or are you measuring them? So another big change is documented information. So no more documents and records, but just documented information. So there are now in the new revision 35 requirements for documented information. And significantly, the new rev no longer specifies or specifically requires a quality manual. Doesn't mean you have to get rid of it, you're just not required to have it. However, if you're AS9100 registered, it's expected that you will still need the quality manual. So don't get rid of it just because you don't need it. So this slide shows the beginning of the first part of an excellent 5-page guidance document available through ISO, and the link will be provided, as well as other ones. So the intent of this change is to allow the amount of detail of documentation to be more relevant to an organization's business needs, and recognize that this documented information can be in a variety of formats. So required documentation still includes the scope of the quality management system. Now it's a requirement of the quality manual, but the quality policy and quality objectives will also have to be documented. So reading the requirements carefully shows there's not a big change. The requirements just reworded differently and says the organization must have evidence of. So maybe you don't need your quality objectives in the quality manual. Maybe it could be on a internal web page. Could be documented somewhere. So one good statement is in the guidance document states that an organization with an existing QMS should not need to rewrite all of its documentation in order to meet the requirements of ISO 9001:2015. So this is particularly true if an organization structured its QMS based on the way it effectively operates using a process approach. So it goes on to say that the organization may be able to simplify or consolidate some of its existing documentation. So most of the current requirements are still there, even if they're in different clauses, and some of them have new terminology or more emphasis. For instance, what's currently called products will now be goods and services, and instead of purchased products, they're externally provided products and services. Suppliers are now external providers. In most cases, these terminology changes are pretty obvious. They're not hard to understand. Processes that will likely not need any change or just slight tweaking include the process approach. So many of you might recognize this graphic from the current revision, and it's updated to reflect the new one. Some experts are claiming that process approach is new. However, it's been there since the 2000 revision. And those of us who work with AS9100 are well aware that the process approach is a requirement that's emphasized with how aerospace auditors must audit in accordance to their standard AS9101. Human resources, now it's people. However, there's a new clause called organizational knowledge, and this expands on the concepts in the current revision, human resources. So this could include expertise, training, tribal knowledge even. Communication is there, production planning and control, design control, purchasing and supplier control, except for now it's control of externally provided processes, products, and services. More of the same, customer property, control of non-conforming products, control of monitoring and measuring equipment, internal audits, management reviews, and corrective action. So lots of the same. So let's look at some of the changes that are specific to the AS9100 revision. So once again, this new revision will include all the requirements of ISO 9001, just like the current revisions, plus some additional requirements and amplifications. So while ISO 9001's moved all its definitions to ISO 9000, AS9100 will have some specific AS definitions in Clause 2, such as product safety and counterfeit products. We've already mentioned that the AS is going to retain the requirements for a quality manual and management representative. The rationale for this is that there are many regulatory requirements that would require this. There's also a new clause on product safety, including requirements to assure product safety and note giving examples of associated processes and revision for consistency of other clauses related to safety, and many related to design and development. So human factors added a consideration and is added as a consideration in nonconformity and corrective action. So no more operator errors as an excuse. You have to address risk in human factors as well. So the current AS9100 risk management requirements align with the new requirements, and with an emphasis on risks in operation and the need for preventive actions amplified. So there's also a new clause on prevention of counterfeit products. There was already some of this in the current revision, but it's not explicitly stated. But if you're wondering why you have to mark non-conforming product rendered unusable, it doesn't say so, but that's because not counterfeit prevention. So this is more clearly defined and enhanced, and this is to mitigate this growing threat of counterfeit or fraudulent product that's always been a concern in aerospace. And now it's explicit and it needs to be addressed and considered in internal activities. Some things like, and not only non-conforming product, but also end-of-life management, reporting, training, and external activities such as purchasing, supplier selection, control, and inspection. So this also touches design and development with the need to ensure design decisions consider the service life of the product. Thankfully, configuration management is clarified and improved to address stakeholder needs. This was always kind of confusing for AS9100 companies. So now to talk about when you'll have to be changing or dealing with these. In next week, you can see how the timeline has gone. That's there was a proposal stage and preparation stages, and now we're at the FDIS. The final draft was released in July of 9001, and the final new revision is supposed to be out on September 23rd this month, so very soon. So that's the timeline of where we've got to now, but let's look at the future, and especially how this is going to affect your company. So probably late first quarter or sometime in the beginning of next year, companies will start to be able to be registered to 9001 2015. And I talked to some registrars, and even in early 2016, some of them are still going to be registering new companies to the 2008 revision, just because they're not quite ready with this. So officially, companies have 3 years from the release date, September 23rd, to switch over. So that means you can start getting registered to 9001 early next year. The new revision of AS9100 is expected to be released in April 2016, and we might expect that sometime in Q3 2016 you can start getting registered or converting to the 2016 revision. But since you have 3 years from publication date, and that's of 9001, not the publication date of AS9100, means that all companies must switch over by September 2018 for both standards. Let's see. So a lot of this is September 2018, but a lot of registration bodies don't want to cut it that late. So I've heard some saying all their clients, they need to switch over by July 2018. So it could be earlier than you expect. And there's not quite clear yet if you can switch over at a surveillance audit. So depending on when your re-registration audit is, if you have that, that's the best time to switch over because it'll audit the full system. But I've talked to some auditors who say they're going to try, or they might be able to switch people over during a surveillance audit, which means you won't have to add days or additional costs, but that's definitely still up in the air.
Is this yours? Okay, so what this means for you, if you're transitioning or doing a new implementation, be cautious. You want to take your time to do it. You have 3 years to do it. The first thing we recommend is that you purchase the final release of the standard, either ISO 9001 or AS9100, along with ISO 9000. And every time the standard revises, there's a flood of information that's available, and I'm going to be going through some of those resources at the end of this presentation for you. If you're already registered, of course, the first thing you should do is check with your registrar and discuss with your registrar what the transition should be. And as Tristan said that it makes sense to do this at your triennial audit if that falls within the transition deadline. And just like any plan, you need to plan, communicate, and execute. And you should use this as an opportunity. So for some companies, this transition is going to be a breeze. Those are the ones who have not paraphrased the standard and have truly taken the process approach. If you're one of those companies that have structured your quality manual and procedures to parrot the clauses of the current revision, this is a great opportunity to streamline your quality system and make it more timeless. And I would recommend starting with mapping your business processes, focusing on the value streams, and seeing where your customer and supplier interfaces are. And then determine what the documented inputs and outputs are or should be for each process and assess against current practice. And this will form your gap assessment. You definitely should involve top management in using a business process tool for identifying risks and opportunities. Tristan mentioned the SWOT tool, which has been around. This is a good tool, but there's a lot of risk management tools that you can use, and this should be an ongoing part of your management reviews. For larger companies, you'll have a team of well-trained internal auditors and can involve them to help shape and revise the quality system. Smaller companies may be well served in hiring some outside help to assist in streamlining their documentation. Just make sure that your outside help is truly qualified and competent. We've seen a lot of consultants that offer what we call ISO in a box packages, and we have found that these typically create a lot of non-value documentation. They just paraphrase the standard and create documents that way. And as Tristan mentioned, there is no requirement for the structure of an organization's quality management system to mirror that of the international standard. Unfortunately, too many companies have chosen to do that, and they're going to have a harder time transitioning. And finally, don't wait until the last minute. When the last revisions came out for both ISO 9001 and AS9100, there was some real scheduling nightmares for the registrars in the last 3 months before the transition deadline. So the time clock starts ticking as soon as the revision is issued, which is about right now. So you have 3 years from now. And particularly in the AS world, you may be aware that there's a shortage of qualified aerospace auditors. So you don't want to wait till the last minute.
So unless you have an urgent need to become registered, we recommend waiting at least a few months until the final revisions issue to schedule your audits. So it takes as mentioned before, you're not going to be immediately able to. Some registrars might do it sooner than others, but most of them should be ready to get you on the new standard, register the new standard sometime early next year in the first quarter. So it's probably better to wait until then, until they have their system figured out and offer it to get registered if you can wait. However, you shouldn't, doesn't mean you can't start now. So with a plan and implementation, like any project, you should develop a good project plan to whatever format suits your business and identify resources and milestones. And just like now, you'll have to have completed a full cycle of internal audits to the new revision and have adequate evidence that your management review and corrective action processes are fully implemented. And those things take some time, so you can't do it all at once. But as time goes on, there'll be more and more resources available for the new revision, which will make this easier and can help.
Right, I'm going to go through some resources, and as Kate mentioned, you will be receiving a copy of this presentation, so don't be concerned about scribbling down web links right now as you'll receive this. First of all, your registrar or certification body should be your prime resource, and you should start discussing with them right away what a transition plan or a good registration date would be for your company. A lot of the larger registrars have been offering free webinars ever since the first draft was published. Registrars like BSI and DNV, some of the bigger ones, and they offer a variety of tools and information kits that are available even if you're not their client. There's also a lot of consulting and training companies offering classes and webinars. Of course, most of these cost money and involve traveling, so some of this depends on how much of a do-it-yourself person you are. We've been inundated with offers for classes and webinars on the new standard for the past year, but for now it seems that there's been enough free information available, and I'm going to share some of those free resources with you. First resources to just go right to the horse's mouth, ISO.org. Technical Committee 176 is the committee that is responsible for ISO 9001, and they maintain a web page that has all kinds of useful links on the standards. So even though you have to purchase the actual standards themselves, there's a lot of free information on their website. The first link I recommend is where the arrow is pointing. This is the correlation matrices. And it's a concise way to link the current requirements to the new requirements. And they're presented in both directions. It's really quick and easy to see what's new and what's the same, but maybe just differently numbered or titled clause. Secondly, I'd go to their transition planning guide, and from there see what else might be helpful. For example, there's 3 presentations on risk-based thinking that help understand that requirement, and there's the one on the requirements for document information that Tristan had shown the beginning of, which is a really useful document. If you're an AS9100 company, IAQG maintains a similar web page. If you go to their homepage, there's a link, 9100 Deployment Support Materials, which has a lot of really good information. Again, on that list, I would start with the correlation matrices, which is set up identically to the ISO ones, and there are also some excellent presentations about the revision. And I expect there's going to be a lot added to this page between now and the release on April 2016. Our experience with the IAQG is that there's a lot of information sharing and support throughout the supply chain, and it seems to be one of the better organized industry sectors on that account. And you don't have to be a member, or this is open to the public. If you're on LinkedIn, LinkedIn has all kinds of discussion groups. You can go to the groups and put in the topic. This is often the first place that we hear about breaking news. On the other hand, some of the discussions can get pretty nerdy, and there's often disagreements and interpretation of the requirements. But it all adds to the understanding and helps prepare for how the requirements may be implemented and audited. We also recommend subscribing to the Standards Insider from InsideStandards.com, which is a free weekly newsletter, just a one-page list of topics, and then you can click on the topics to read more. So this is a really good way to stay up to date. Some other resources, the Manufacturing Extension Programs, or MEPs, as we call them. If you're not familiar with these are like the agricultural extension programs that operate in each state. We're fortunate that both Washington and Oregon have very active MEPs, and they're a good resource for all kinds of manufacturing issues. And in the interest of full disclosure, Tristan and I both work as third-party contractors for both MEPs. but regardless, they are a good resource, and they may be offering some training in the revision of the standards in upcoming months. Another really great resource is the American Society for Quality. If you're a member, you'll receive a monthly journal, the Quality Progress. And for the last year, every issue of Quality Progress has had some article related to the upcoming revisions. The issue that came out last week, their cover story is called Keep Calm and Prepare for ISO 9001 2015. And it's a really good article where 8 experts outline the key changes and how to handle them. ASQ offers a lot of resources and webinars. They have a monthly e-newsletter called Standards Connection. Again, this is free if you're an ASQ member. Has all the latest ISO revision news and information. There's the Standards channel, which has interviews with top experts on the revisions. And then Standards Central, which has submit a question to the experts blog, so you can actually ask questions and get answers. And then ASQ has local sections throughout the Pacific Northwest. There's an active section in Portland, and I expect that they'll probably offer some programs on the new revisions. You're also welcome to contact Tristan and me directly if you have further questions or would like more information on what we've presented here today. And now we're going to turn over the moderation to Kate as we open up to questions from the webinar participants.
Thank you so much. Very informative. Great. We do have a couple audience questions here. First of all, is it really necessary to purchase ISO 9000?
Well, it's certainly not a requirement. However, if you want to implement the standard and understand the intent behind the requirements, this is a really important document to have. And particularly because your auditor is going to be looking at the standard that has terms that may be new to us. All of that terminology is explained in 9000. So it explains the fundamentals, and I think it's a really important companion, and I would recommend purchasing it.
Great, thank you. We do have a couple clarifications. When is revision D expected to come out?
April 2016.
Great, great. And then also, what kind of objective evidence do we need to show for risk-based thinking?
So this one, I think, is going to be one of the more difficult ones that auditors and registered companies deal with, how they show this. So the standard is intentionally open or vague because they want you to design a quality system that meets your needs. So for AS9100 companies, you already have risk management as a requirement, and this will largely meet your requirements for risk-based thinking, or will provide evidence if you have risk management process in your planning or contract review stage, and also your corrective actions, which you should already be doing, are going to be very good evidence of risk management, that you're identified and are reducing it. And the old preventive action, you can call it whatever you want, but this is another good way of showing evidence of risk-based thinking, that you're predicting risks. Anything?
I think we covered that.
Great, thank you. We do have an additional question. Will AS9120 be released at the same time as AS9100?
That
9120 is, I don't know.
Oh, that's, I'm not familiar with all the ones that are for like repair stations and distributors, and I don't know that question. I'm I would recommend going to the IAQG website, and there's probably information on that.
Looks like that is all the questions that we have now. I will welcome any attendees, if you have any last-minute questions, to go ahead and type those out now in the question field. At this time, though, I would like to thank Marcia and Tristan for sharing their considerable expertise. This is important information for all our members to know. We really appreciate you sharing it with us. And thank you, everyone, for attending. I would like to remind you this and many other events are available at PNDC's website. Just go to pndc.us, click on the events. A few highlights: we will have a networking lunch out at Omega Morgan in Hillsborough this Thursday. We'll also have an ITAR Lunch and Learn in Seattle on September 30th. We'll be presenting another webinar, The War on Talent, about recruiting and retaining talented employees, October 15th. And then do mark your calendar for PNDC's 10th annual dinner this November 11th. Thank you again, Marcia and Tristan, and a reminder to all our attendees, we will be sending you a copy of the slides so you can have all those great resources at your fingertips. Looks like that's all the questions we have. Thank you so much, and our webinar has now ended.